Hi, I'm David Batsoffen, and today I'm chatting to Colin Patrick. Colin, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
All right, thank you. From a FGASA point of view, what are your, I know that you're a scout with FGASA, and you're also in charge of certain aspects of
Yes,
the,
that's correct.
go ahead.
So basically, yeah, they call it a scout qualification. A scout qualification is a professional field guide with tracking-based qualifications added to that. So a scout is a professional field guide, FGASA Dangerous Game Walking guide, and then has the senior tracker qualification with Cyber Tracker.
All right, and you also look at their trails-based course content, do you not?
Yes, so basically, FGASA has a what we call a standards committee, and in particular, this is with regards to walking-based guiding. So I head up the committee that looks at the qualification and the standards of walking-based guiding for the Field Guides Association of Southern Africa.
At the moment, FGASA, I know, is looking into certain of the qualifications, looking at the standards of those qualifications. What has come out of those meetings, Colin?
So yeah, if maybe I can go back a step.
Sure.
What happens every few years is FGASA will have a look at the qualification to see how we can maintain a standard, potentially increase the standard, and then make it a workable qualification for field guides. This process, the latest process, actually started in 2016 already. So it's been quite a long process. Lengthy in the sense that we had to have a lot of input from industry, looking at where we've come from, where we want to go to, guides that were tasked to do that, and it culminated in what we are now going to be talking about, which is the current walking-based guiding structure, or what we call the protocols.
All right, so let's have a look at those, and maybe for those FGASA people that are watching this, you can break it down into the new aspects of the training qualification.
Yes, so when we talk about new aspects, I would almost say it's the fine tuning or the modification of the current structure. Basically, what we're looking at from a walking-based guides point of view is we got different categories, and those are potential different categories of growth or experience and qualification based for a guide. So the first qualification that a guide will attain in this process would be your apprentice trails guide. The next step that we then go on to, that a guide could go on to, is what we call a trails guide. Then the person with experience moves on to what we would call a professional trails guide, and then the person can start specializing, and again specializing in walking in areas where potentially dangerous game occur, and that is what we call the FGASDG, or special knowledge and skills with regards to dangerous game walking-based guiding. Those are basically the qualifications from a FGASA point of view that a guide can attain in walking-based guiding.
And do each of those have, obviously when you're starting off, there's a level, and then does it get incrementally more difficult, or just incrementally more intense along the way?
So basically what we're doing is, if we take the apprentice coming into the industry, that person would normally fulfill a theoretical component of walking-based guiding. In that, it is also linked to some practical-based guiding. What we've done in the structure of the learning of that and the qualification itself is we found, and this is where one of the changes have taken place, we found that it's very important at that point in time that the guide, or the potential guide, the apprentice trails guide, is exposed to people that are in the industry that have experience. We call those mentors. So there's what we call the core training hours. There's a certain amount of hours that an apprentice trails guide has to build up, of which the core of those hours, the person is then exposed to mentors. Now, mentors are experienced people that have the knowledge linked to the experience as well, and the aim of that is so that those people, the mentors, can translate as much knowledge and experience as possible to your apprentices, your people coming into the industry. And that covers the apprentice trails guide from in a broad overview. Then when we go into the trails guide situation, or the qualification, there we have workplace guiding, where we include that. So there the guide has got the theoretical base. They've had the apprentice stage covered. So they've gone through a learning process with mentors, and then they go on to the actual workplace guiding. And there they build experience in that sort of, from that aspect. And then, and this is what you were saying then, so yes, it does incrementally increase in knowledge and also experience. Then the professional trails guide is somebody who's built up a number of hours. In this case, a person who generally has 600 hours of walking within potentially dangerous game areas. And that then puts the person the further in a step towards specializing in walking-based guiding, which is your FGASA DG qualification. And there we're looking at special knowledge. So it's somebody you could take, for example, a bird specialist, arthropod specialist, something like that. We're looking at particularly now walking-based specialist. And there, again, there's a theory component with regards to that, but the majority is practical-based. We add another aspect, and obviously you would have heard the word ARH, so advanced raffle handling. In walking-based guiding, we realize that having a tool like a firearm is unfortunately a necessity. So we add that all the way from the apprentice trails guide. That qualification is linked to the walking-based qualification. And it's the ability of a person to handle a firearm effectively, and that's where the word advanced rifle handling comes from. And there's a number of aspects with regards to that.
Talking about that, but I want to just go back a step, pun intended. 600 hours. How long does that take somebody to put together? I mean, that's an incredible, with the exception of one trails guide that I think both you and I know well, who has, I think, over 1,500 hours. How do you put 600 hours together, Colin?
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why this process took so long to actually look at and develop. We were looking at the reality of things.
Yeah.
And 600 hours, you're looking, and obviously it depends on how often the individual walks, and where the individual's based, whether the individual's based in purely walking-based guiding, or the individual is based in a setup where they are doing vehicle-based guiding and walking-based guiding. But you're averaging at about 5 years, and that can differ.
Okay.
Yes, so that was one of the aspects that we did look at when we looked at the actual hours, to relate to that. But I'm going to put something in here, and now we remember we just said that this is a professional trails guide. So if I had to ask you the question, a professional in our society is generally classified as of attaining how many hours? And we know the answers, they say it's 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So there we get a little bit of a relation here of what we're talking about. Now,
okay. Yeah, but to put together,
so it gives you a little bit of an idea here, and this is quite an interesting concept, I think. And here we go back to the early 90s, and that when the Field Guides Association of South Africa started, and they said, well, what do we want to achieve? And what we wanted to achieve, one of them, I was privileged to be there at that sort of time, is we wanted to say in 10, 15, 20 years that we're doing this as a profession. And I think that's what we're working towards. That's why we've got these standards. That's why we've got these qualifications. And I personally believe, if I look back in that history, FGASA has attained that. We've literally become a profession that's recognized. And this again is where the motive comes in, to relook at our qualifications and align accordingly.
Now you spoke of ARH. How has that qualification changed or been modified?
Okay, so
to use your terms.
Well, if I had to put it very simply, in the current situation of things, is we've added very few, or we've changed very few aspects. I can give you those aspects, and then maybe I must go back and just give you a little bit of reasoning behind the ARH. So the changes that actually have taken place is the most prominent change is the fact that on the exercise that we call the shot placement exercise, or now the new sort of commonly called name is the double shoot, is where we have two candidates standing next to each other, and on the command fire, those candidates will then shoot together at their own separate targets. That is the biggest fundamental change. The reasoning we brought this in is because in most cases, if you've gone on walking-based guiding, whether it be in national parks or in private game reserves, you normally have what we have two roles. You have what we call a first rifle and a second rifle. And if an incident happens where you have to unfortunately use your firearm, it's normally both guides using their firearms, and therefore they have to be quite adequate at actually firing next to each other. And that's the reason why we brought in that change. But if I look at the whole, and this is something that's very important, and I think it's what myself and what the committee and what FGASA stands for, is we see a firearm as a tool. If you really take it, if you take the human factor out of it, a firearm is potentially a piece of metal and a piece of wood. It's the human element that will make it either effective as a tool or potentially very dangerous. Like you pick up a grinder that's not being operated by a human. It's just a piece of plastic and a piece of metal.
Yeah.
But it's the human factor that changes it, and that's quite important to us. So what I always say to guides that I'm either training or coming up in the system is, I say, remember, this is just simply a tool. And what you must add to this tool is to the following aspect. Myself as a guide, and I believe any guide that is guiding in this environment that we have the privilege of walking in, must have the motive that we want to go out and enjoy this environment. We want to be able to expose people, clients, to this environment, teach them about this environment, and hopefully nurture love for them about this environment. And therefore, we should always have the motive of never, ever having to go to the situation or to the extent where we have to use something like a firearm, our tool, to protect ourselves or our clients. And that, to me, is the fundamental motive that every guide should have. But I have a very clear understanding that it is a tool that I can use to defend myself if that situation arrives. Now, statistically, if we look at historically, there are times, if we walk in this environment, there's a number of factors that are totally out of our control. And we realize that something could happen, that the point does come where I have to now protect myself or my client's life. And that's the only time where I'll use a firearm. But my motive should be that I never have to use it. But if I have to use it, I have to know how to use it effectively. And that's probably a very important aspect there. And that's where the ARH comes from. So we're talking about an advanced rifle handling. And it's an advanced stage of handling a firearm, or in this case, our tool. And we want to prepare the candidate, the guide, to be able to effectively do it. But at the same time, we always keep in the back of our mind that we never have to use it, if that makes sense to you.
Have you, yeah, it does indeed. Have you kept in the ballistics aspect of it? In other words, do candidates have to know, aside from the caliber of the weapon that they're using, do they have to know trajectories and make allowances for wind, considering that they're not hunting, and that if they do happen to use this tool, it's going to be used at somewhere between 1 and maybe 3 meters? You're not shooting it in, you're not a sniper with this thing.
Yes, that's right. So basically, that, no, 100% correct. So that sort of knowledge is background knowledge. We've really had a look at those sort of aspects of saying, well, this is not really necessary from a guiding point of view. It's a good to know if the guide wants to know that, but it's not specifically as a guiding requirement, if you put it as such. What we've tried to do, and this is the process that we followed, is we want to always link it practically to what is necessary, what is helpful in the guiding-based industry. And we spent quite a big period of time where we looked at certain incidences, so historical incidents that have actually occurred. We've spoken to people with a large number of experience. You mentioned the hours. So, you know, I can just give the committee as an example. The committee averages with 10,000 plus hours per person. So it is achievable. If you're asking about the 600 hours, yeah, it is achievable. But bearing in mind, we get called old men a little bit, but those people generally got about 15, 20 years of experience.
Yeah.
Again, bringing to light the fact that this has become a profession now, and we're very proud of it being a profession. So yes, those aspects that are what we call the not necessities have been sort of sidelined or put to the thing, and we've tried to bring out aspects that are more important to the fore. Yes, particularly if you start looking at how to handle a firearm under stressful situations. So what we did with the ARH exercises, and this is something that comes back all the way from around about 2005, if I remember correctly, where individuals sat. Some of those people are still on the committee at the moment. And we have a look at each exercise has specifically been designed to teach and assess a person according to a practical-based experience. And if one looks at each of those exercises, we can take the simulated charge, for example. Originally, we used to pull that by hand. There was different forms. Now we've got a mechanical device that averages at least 8 meters a second. And it's becoming a more realistic sort of approach. So if a person stands in front of that simulated charge and has to handle that situation, our purpose is, first of all, to prepare the person that if that real life situation happens, they can handle it. And remember, we're working towards a situation, what we call muscle memory or subconscious effort, because you've just said it, at 3 meters and at the speed, an average speed of a lion coming at 22 meters a second, there's not much time to think about what's going on. Yeah. But most of your actions are going to be subconscious. They're going to be what we call muscle memory. And part of what we do in the ARH is to prepare a person for that and then assess them to see whether they have the ability to do that. We've changed the targets over the years to be more real looking. So it's actual animals. We did a lot of study in those things. We just see them as a target nowadays, and it looks like a nice target. But if you go into the detail of it, if you look at those targets, the heads have been made as real life as possible by a graphic designer, and the body's actually been made smaller because we're trying to bring out the aspect of reality. We actually take those animals and actually dart them. It's generally when we're doing research or veterinary work on that, and then I have access to that, and then we actually do the measurements of the eyes and the positioning of the brain, all that sort of things. There's a lot of detail that have gone into it over the years, and I'm quite confident to say that I think we've come up with a fine tuning that's very, very good for the field guard industry.
And you're still recommending 2 specific weapons?
So we have what we call a minimum caliber. So the minimum caliber that we recommend is a .375 or larger.
Okay.
There's a saying when it comes to guarding and handling dangerous game in general, is the bigger the better.
Yeah.
The aspect of it is guards, if that situation does occur on a walking based excursion or safari, guards are probably sitting with the most extreme of situations. It's an animal charging you, because in most cases, a guard will either stop or divert the potential problem before it actually occurs. But in the situation where they have to use their firearm, they're sitting with the extreme situation. An animal that's charging them at very close quarters, and therefore caliber is quite a big role to play. We say a minimum of .375 as a caliber. The general recommended is a .458. It's a lot of times personal preference, but we do have to have a minimum that we work with. And remember, a lot of these aspects we also have to align with the legal aspect with regards to the government's legal aspects and things like that.
All right, because at the end of the day, this is not a hunt. That, as you keep pointing out, and rightly so, that rifle is just a tool. And at the end of the day, with an adrenaline-filled animal charging at you, you want to make certain that both you and your guests are safe. So literally, first shot or double shot from both the first and second rifle need to count. You can't go, oh, we'll just track it for the next hour and then we'll shoot it. It's got to, unfortunately, happen in that moment.
Yes, so I'm going to say it again, and I know you said I've been hounding on it, but I think it's very important. I'll tell you that a misconception that we have in the industry, and potentially from a client point of view, is that guards are these gung-ho people that walk around with big rifles. Well, the reality is they do walk around with big rifles. But again, our motive, and I'm sure that most field guards' motive is that we never have to use it on trail.
Yeah.
But we realize that if that case happens, we have to then do it. And it's quite an important decision that a guard must make, because that decision is not an easy decision. When an animal's charging at you, you want to try everything possible to actually divert that situation. The last resort is having to decide that now you've got to destroy an animal. It's not a very nice decision, but it's a decision that in some cases has to be made, and you have to have a very clear picture of it, in the sense that once you've made that decision, there can't be any hesitation, because that unfortunately can cause major problems from your self point of view, from your client's point of view, and even the animal's point of view. But yes, that is all happening on the extreme, at that 1 or 2 meters, that animal's coming at you. And that's why we hound so much on the preparation thereof. That's why the exercises there's a time pressure with regards to those exercises. There's the time pressure, and it's not necessarily the actual pulling the trigger part. It's also the actual physical rifle handling part. So how quick and effective can a person load the magazine with cartridges? How quick and effective can the person bring that rifle up to their shoulder? How quick and effective can the person reload and things like that? And that becomes quite important. And that's what we handle on the actual assessments with regards to that. To give you a little bit of a scenario, and we went and looked at some statistics of unfortunate incidences where guards had to use their firearms. On average, if everything goes well and there's an incident where an animal would have to be destroyed, on average 5 shots are fired. Now remember, that is 2 guards, and that's again why we have what we call a first rifle and a second rifle. It used to be called lead and backup. Now, invariably, you're always going to have somebody who's the leader within that team, but it's a team. The reason we've moved away from lead and backup is because at some point in time, the backup might actually be leading, and vice versa. So it's actually just a function or a role play. It's like if you're playing soccer and you've got a defense and you've got a striker. At some point, one guard might be first rifle, and at another point he might be second rifle, and vice versa. Now, in most instances, and this is why we have 2 rifles, is that you can effectively handle that situation. Normally, you will have a situation where the guards will fire if they have to. They'll communicate with each other as far as possible, immediately fire another shot so that they make sure they're effective once they've made the decision to destroy the animal, and then normally a last shot as what we call a coup de grace, and that's where on average 5 round shots will be fired.
Okay. Colin, what happens if somebody is left-handed, for instance? I know you can't rejig a rifle to shoot left-handed, but can you teach a left-handed to shoot right-handed, or is there a workaround for people that may find it a bit awkward?
Yes, so there is actually, you can buy left-handed rifles. It's quite interesting. They generally are quite costly though. So what we've done from the RH point of view is we generally, and this is my own personal opinion now, I personally don't like to say somebody who's left-handed to shoot right-handed. They can do that, and a lot of us have actually trained ourselves to do that, because it's good to know that you can use both hands, both eyes, for example. But a left-handed person can fire a right-handed firearm left-handed. And in actual fact, with practice, I've noticed, and this is just my opinion now, left-handed people can actually be quicker. There's 1 or 2 slight changes with regards to how you handle the firearm, and it's particularly got to do with working the bolt, and it's got to do with if you have what we call an immediate action drill. So that's where you have a situation where you either have a hang fire or a misfire, how to handle that situation effectively and safely. There's 1 or 2 modifications, if you call it that the left-handed person would have to deal with, but it is achievable.
Colin, for people who watch this and then know that they're about to do an ARH or maybe do some trails work, can they get hold of the FGASA officers and find out more about it, or maybe get some of the new manuals?
Yes, so this it's very good that you asked this question. What has come out of if we take this time that we've spent in actually looking at this qualification and standardizing the qualification, ensuring that the standard is of the correct standard and that it's practically achievable, is we've developed what we call protocols. So protocols is like a vehicle manual. If I am driving a vehicle and the light comes on, well, then I know, I just open the manual and it tells me what to do. We've realized that these protocols have become very important to us. And you can, FGASA is actually going to be putting that on the website, and these protocols are accessible to FGASA members, non-members, assessors, trainers, training providers, so that we're all talking the same language. I don't want to be able to take my interpretation of something and teach it to somebody and have the potential of giving the incorrect interpretation.
Right.
So if I go back to my protocol, I can show either the person I'm training or the fellow member and say, well, this is what the protocol says, and here's the reasoning behind the protocols. And we're basically all talking the same language. So I would say, yes, get your hands on that protocol, have a look at it. We've actually gone through the extent. We are what we call in the implementation phase at the moment. This has been a process, what we call public participation, where we said to people, please give us input so that we can relook at things. So, and that particularly involved the practicality from a training provider point of view to see, obviously it's also got to be practically achievable.
Yeah.
And we've had a look at it and we believe it can be. And we've now moved on to a stage where we are now implementing it. So what we've now basically doing is we now having workshops where either assessors, training providers, trainers, and mentors join the workshop, and we literally go through those protocols, and then we do the practicality of it, the ARH and things like that. And that has been very, very effective, because now we're all getting on the same page. Invariably, we need to do that so that we're talking the same language, and that. So yes, those protocols, if that answers your thing,
yes,
I would suggest that you do that. Yeah, good.
We've been chatting with Colin Patrick. Colin, thank you for that information. It's most useful. And I hope people who watch this will follow up, get the protocols, make sure that they're all on the same page so that going forward, FGASA can go from strength to strength.
Very good. Thanks for chatting with me.